Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Greater Seattle Tarot Meetup and the Denver Tarot Geeks. We are doing a joint series on the faces of the Decans via astrology, the decanic images, and tarot. And I'm Joy Vernon, and my co-host is John Allen, and we're going to be talking about these really cool things with you. So the first thing I wanted to do is talk about an overview of the Decans. And for those that are here right now, I just put that into the chat. It should be up now. And basically, the Decans started. They are 10-degree segments of the zodiac, and they started in Egypt about roughly 4,000 years ago as a calendar and timekeeping device that basically outlined essentially 36 10-day weeks out of the year. And the and each decan was associated with a star that rose in the morning before the sun could be seen. And that star marked that decan. And the stars were typically associated or considered gods or deities or something like that. And unfortunately, because of precession and a number of, because this calendar lasted, this thing that the Egyptians were doing lasted like 1800 years, or no, yeah, like 1800 years, I think is what Austin Coppock says. A really, really long time. So after a certain number of centuries, the stars were not rising at they had shifted because of precession. And so they weren't matching the same week. So in Austin's book, he says that there's like more than 50 lists of the decans and the matching star just that have been found, and that none of those match up with each other. And so trying to actually pinpoint exactly which star it matches each decan and which star matched each decan at a particular point in time in Egyptian history is the task of many a scholar. And there are some pretty good attempts at reconciling that, but I've got to admit I have trouble understanding them. So that's it's like but it really triggers the imagination. It's like, ooh, so each decan is a star and a deity and a time period. So we're gonna just mostly work with the time period throughout the year. And then meanwhile, over in Mesopotamia and all of that stuff, Babylonia, the Chaldeans were putting together this 12 sign zodiac. And so they developed this division of the year into these 12 signs, while the Egyptians had divided the year into 36 weeks. And so then it all, somewhere around the Hellenistic period, I think it just all got enmeshed, and the decans actually became seen as subsets of the 12 zodiacal signs. And so that's kind of the history of it, and how it's changed throughout time. Then where we went from that is that even back in Egyptian time, the in the coffin lid texts, there were descriptions of each decan that were probably used both for, again, there was a calendrical purpose, but there was also this spiritual or priestly purpose behind these. And because they were shown on the coffin lids, not only did they mark time during life, but they apparently had some symbolism during the crossing over of the death process as well. Um, and and then and these things spread like crazy. There's evidence of them in pretty much all cultures. And so these written descriptions of these decanic periods kind of proliferated, like I said, in most cultures, in Indian, Egyptian, Middle Eastern. I think there was a Japanese text that used them, and continued on later on into Europe, etc. And of course we still work with them today. And the Golden Dawn assigned the planetary rulers of the decans to the Minor Arcana tarot cards, which is how they all line up now. But one of the things that's very interesting about this is the fact that those images were always written. And so to me, what that says is that they were meant to be imagined. They were meant to be visualized. They were meant to connect us with an energy that is not a physically represented energy, but is an imagined energy. And so I think that that's one of the keys to working with them. Although, of course, if you're an artist and you start working on visualizing this stuff, you're going to want to draw it. And so, yes, there have been uh, visual representations of these images going back, to a pretty good amount of time. But a lot of people always ask, well, I want to see the original image. And there isn't anything to see because the original image was written as words. So that's kind of the basic overview. John, do you have anything that you want to include or add here?
I think probably wanted to also, I mean, I was going to bring this up anyway before we would actually go through the images and descriptions, but a lot of these descriptions of the imagery are separated by vast distances of culture and time and language, and just the whole circumstances behind what's going on in that culture that's going on is a lot of relevance to each description. So you're going to see a lot of variation of these images, some of which may be more fantastical than others, and there are definitely some very odd images that are designed to stick in the mind, either because of their outrageousness or because of their surreal qualities. And as far as I guess, the Decans are concerned, also we wanted to also remind everyone that we're using the Chaldean order of planetary rulership rather than the triplicity rule. Now, the triplicity rule is, as you probably may know, if you have studied this, is based on the planetary rulers of each of the like signs of that element and being assigned to subsequent decans in each of those. This one the system we're using is based on planetary rulerships going in a cycle of speed from slowest to fastest, I believe. So it would be a sequence going from Saturn, then going to Jupiter, then going to Mars, to the Sun, et cetera, et cetera. So just in case anybody has or uses a different planetary rulership, we're just using the traditional Hellenistic style.
Okay, awesome.
So our first decan we're going to go through here is obviously the first decan of Capricorn. And this is from 0 to 9 degrees, ruled by Jupiter, as we were saying before. This is based on the Chaldean orders. So Jupiter is the ruler of this decan. It's known esoterically. The title of the deck, I guess you could say that the card is Lord of Harmonious Change. The gist of this decan, and I'm using a lot of, I'm drawing inspiration from Austin Coppock's book here for just describing what the Decan is kind of all about. And it's in his view. It's a process of descending into earth consciousness and with the intention of redeeming it. So it's kind of like being kind of identifying with gross matter, the real concrete aspects of the world. As harmonious change goes, it's a lot of it has to do with, I think, just choosing a new territory in which to take root. This Decan is often used for magical purposes to initiate a new venture, either a new job or a new position, like the job or relocating, things like that. Part of that, I think, has to do with the fact that this Decan presides over the winter solstice. It is the beginning of that Decan, and it extends into our calendar new year, where we kind of take stock of the things that have occurred in the past years, and then we look forward to the prospects of the new one. So we'll go ahead and we'll start, and we've selected 6 images to go through. We'll just kind of go through them one at a time, briefly, and then we'll get a chance to look at all 6 of them together. Our first image is that from Ibn Ezra, which he describes as an irascible black man, his body like that of a wild boar, with much hair, and his teeth are sharp and long as beams. And he has a cattle goad, and he catches fish. Now, the goad, I think this is, I think, Ezra's descriptions tend to, be a little more on the case, they include more animalistic imagery. And I think, I think in this particular case, it's, again, our identification with, I guess, not just, like we can look at it as gross matter, but can also look at it as an identification with nature and with the basis nature. And the goad that he uses is kind of like his wand, in which he uses to command large gross forces. Like goads are used to steer large animals like oxen and elephants. Our next image comes from the Picatrix. A man with a reed in his right hand and a hoopoo bird in his left. And this is a face of happiness, joy, and bringing things to an end that are sluggish, weak, and proceeding poorly. I think with this one, you can kind of get that Jupiterian influence there with at least with the explanation of what this face represents, and it's bringing things that are weak and poorly to an end. Next, we have the image from Agrippa. Agrippa's description is the form of a woman and a man carrying full bags. And the signification for these is to go forth and to rejoice, to gain and to lose with weakness and baseness. I think here we have an image that evokes that striking out to establish a new territory for oneself in the new year, whatever that may be, and doing so with just very much the bare minimum. Next, we have Giordano Bruno, and his image is described as a man in merchant's garb with a face both ugly and sad. He is followed by a young man and clapping his hands. Now, the imagery of the merchant itself is kind of a reference to those materialistic things that we do associate earth signs with, in particular Capricorn in this case. So it's referencing those material and financial desires that are associated with the Decan. Our fifth image comes from Aleister Crowley. And Crowley takes a number of his images from the Picatrix pretty consistently. So we'll probably won't see a lot of difference between the two, although there are some slight differences. We have the image as a man holding his right-handed javelin rather than a reed, and in his left a lapwing. Now the difference of the bird may have some kind of very significant or specific significant symbolic significance. What that might be, I'm not sure. However, there is that image of the bird in the hand, which kind of calls to mind that old adage, the bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. At least that's what I came, that's kind of triggered that whole thing in my mind. But there is that, and we'll look at this image a little more closely in a few minutes. But then we'll go ahead and we'll cap off our tour of the faces here with Austin Coppock's description, which is a headless body. Now, this is how he describes it as a descent to deep levels of atavistic consciousness in which we're identifying with the earth. And you're kind of forgetting your own ego in this particular case. You're letting the body consciousness take over. Okay, and now, so there we have all 6 of them. Now, what we were thinking of doing, and Joy, we can do this or not do this, but we have an opportunity to do a little meditation, a Skrying meditation, so that we can have these images here in our peripheral vision, and we can let them influence us, or we can gravitate towards one. But I think the goal here is to kind of take that energy, take the same kind of energies that we've been looking at or talking about in the course of looking at these images, and kind of seeing what comes to mind through meditation. If there's a new image, if there's a variation on the old ones. So would you like to try that? Okay. So we'll take a few moments and just contemplate what we've got. Okay, so we'll come out of that now and come back to our discussion. Would anybody like to share anything that they got, or if they got anything?
I have to say that Austin's was really kind of the easiest approach for me to get into the energy. Um, the idea, I was just talking with a client the other day who was trying to help her son who was headed off to college, trying to help him. And one of the things we ended up talking about, from the point of view of a like a 19-year-old male or 18-year-old male or whatever he was this, how do you help instill this idea of career in somebody that doesn't really know about it? And career, of course, is often associated with Capricorn. And the idea of we're so focused on the mind in our modern society, and trying to get back into the body and the work and the routines and the discipline that are all associated with changing your life towards, looking forward towards that career stage. I think that there's a lot of the ego loss really resonated, because I think in the discussion we were having, I think she was talking about her son having to kind of lose a little bit of his ego around some things in order to learn discipline and learn about earthly and material responsibilities. Um, and the other thing that came to mind is I forget exactly what Hal and I were talking about just like yesterday, I think. But something about having like a great deal of imagination, and Hal mentioned like some particular person that embodied this, whatever we were talking about, had been a cobbler. And I said, yeah, I really think that when you're just doing things with your hands and just not, it's not even something you have to think about, because you just know how to do it. You know how to make it. You know how to go through the steps of that. It's just in your body. It's muscle memory. I think that really frees the mind. And it's lovely how Austin used, and you can see that in his book, there's grain all like behind the headless figure, and the AI pulled that up kind of nicely with grain for the head. It frees the brain to release and grow uh, and I don't know, expand. I want to say vegetate or something like that. It's not quite the word I want, but it really lets it grow. And so I think that there's a really nice connection between some of these things. It was probably too long a response, but I got a lot during that minute.
I found image number one and Austin's, but I happen to be really a fan of Austin's work anyway. So Austin's really appealed to me, but for reasons that I realized were similar. Both of the images are extremely direct and very focused. For me, the first image is an undiminishable, undoubtable, unmovable figure, which brings to me a lot of what I feel with Capricorn. To begin with, the coldness, the absolute almost ruthlessness of it in its operation, where Austin's work at the same time had this same kind of directness. But what I noticed with that image for me was the way it's part of the field. So what you see representing the mind is the field. The field itself is the mind. So I think there's a real specific connection there about blending into the field. The field of what? Well, the field of insight, the field of growth, the letting go of attachment to the specific to become part of the general. And they both have a similar kind of power, but in completely different ways. The others did not speak to me in the same way. They were there was too much material, too much movement, too many specifics, where direct, kind of untranslatable, except at a couple of levels, were the most powerful. And for me, that actually speaks to even the power of Capricorn.
And that's it does speak to the power of simplicity when it comes to this, the description. So a lot of these descriptions, as they go through and become more modern, they become more slimmed down. It seems like Austin's are probably the shortest descriptions that we have, and it's from our current century.
Hi, yes, thank you. I had a few interesting things that came through in this very short meditation. Was the first thing that came through was thought to form, because with the two, we're no longer one, we're looking to seek relationship. And I noticed the hands in all of them. So it takes a natural thought to come to form, to create some type of resource. The first image by, who did you say, Ibn Ezra, I'd never seen before. And to me, it was the most Capricornian of the bunch, I guess, because it takes single-minded determination to bring a thought to form and to create something with it, to actually apply it, to make it real. Again, I liked that I could see hands on all of them. That was something I noticed. And the one by, sorry, the third picture with the couple walking away.
That was Agrippa.
Right, Agrippa. I couldn't remember, sorry. That one to me correlated with Aleister Crowley's, because there's power in two, but Crowley's image, his stance is very much about being centered and being in his power. So that's what came to me.
Excellent.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm alone in this or just too far out there, but I was also thinking about the dark, almost whimsical humor of a Capricorn that is not always talked about. And there was something that stood out to me about Austin's image that seemed to capture that more than everything else is showing the strength and the ambition and the determination, but there's another layer of Capricorn that image seems to suggest.
Yeah, I think it was in the Kabbalistic, in at least in Kabbalistic ideas about Capricorn too. I think the key, it stands for the quality of mirth in humans. So it's that. So it's a good observation. Okay, and we probably might as well get going with our next. Well, can we have a limited amount of time? So we've got one image that we can look at, in particular, alongside the image of the card that the Decan is associated with. We're using Rider-Waite-Smith imagery for that. So look at those. Let me see if we can get going here with that. So we're going to focus on Crowley's for now. And the question I think we were going to pose was, how do we see, okay, and we probably have been looking at this too with, we've already been discussing this, is like the question that we were going to pose to the group was, how do we see the astrology in the image? And we've been doing a pretty good job at doing that with so far with all the various ones that we've been looking at. I can go ahead and pull up the card, or Joy, would you like to do both of them separately or together?
And I thought we were going to talk about because we talked about Capricorn so far, but I forgot and it seems like other people might have forgotten too to add the Jupiter part in. So I think we're going to talk about the Jupiter, this being the first decan, or what is called the cardinal decan of this cardinal Earth sign, and it's ruled by Jupiter. And so exploring Jupiter in Capricorn, which of course is a sign of its fall, and see if we can see Jupiter, this combination of Jupiter being in charge of this part of Capricorn, if we can see that in the image.
Okay, and let me do this image, and then we'll add the card afterwards.
Right.
Okay. So, okay, so we have here an image which is with a Jupiterian influence.
And it might, I think for me, it might help to just start with Jupiter and Capricorn without worrying about the image, and just think of some of the things that we see, that we think of. It's like, what does Jupiter represent? You know, to me, it's authority, it's leadership, it's generosity. Jupiter is a teacher, it can be a priest, a magistrate, it's the advisor to the king. You know, those are some of the qualities of Jupiter. It's a greater benefic. It tends to be fairly positive and expansive. So when we think of that ruling the first decan of Capricorn, which is going to be as an earth sign, is going to be a little bit more enclosed or controlling or limited than Jupiter's preferred spaces, such as that are more expansive, such as Pisces or Sagittarius. But so I don't know, does anyone want to riff off of that and kind of see where you go with how Jupiter fits into Capricorn, particularly the first third of Capricorn?
I guess Saturn for me keeps Jupiter in moderation rather than expanding too fast. Balance,
Yeah.
diet.
Yeah. Reality check. Okay, good.
I actually have a question. Could I ask a question
Yeah,
right here?
absolutely.
So I'm looking at the Rider-Waite, which is the Two of Pentacles, obviously of the character holding and balancing two pentacles in the Ouroboros. And I know that I know from the astrology and tarot that Jupiter actually, this is like basically Jupiter in Capricorn. So now I finally understand why it's Jupiter in Capricorn on this card. But the card itself usually stands for change or gains and losses, or almost everything at this point that I know about that card suggests that it's actually describing the Jupiter quality in Capricorn as the meaning of that card. Is that accurate?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so
I mean,
that
there's
helps.
different. It's not the only influence on standard interpretations of the card, but it's definitely a fairly major influence. Yeah.
Okay, I just want to confirm that because it really helps me now understand, correlate the astrology to the tarot. Because I just came to the tarot in the last year, but I've been involved in astrology for years, and I could not make them make sense to me. But I hadn't
Yeah.
really studied with someone who was really a deep, tarot teacher yet. So this is very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Anybody else want to take a stab at Jupiter and Capricorn or relate it now to this image that we see here? It was the Two of Pentacles. We're going to actually talk about the Two of Pentacles in about 2 minutes when we finish talking about this. So that is on the agenda.
I was thinking it's like where Saturn is contractive and it's like form and it gives shape to something. Like I was almost thinking of like blowing a bubble, but like an idea bubble where like Jupiter wants to expand and it just wants to it's so like philosophical, and it's like the higher mind, and you come up with this like really lofty idea, and then Saturn kind of like forces you into a kind of confinement, but that's how you create like because Saturn's like the material, so like you create the actual material or like the matter out of it. So, it begins to form a shape, and then it kind of like condenses into this dense material, and then you can kind of like work from it. So it's kind of like bringing the idea into actual shape or form.
Yeah, that's perfect, and it really expresses Austin. Again, Austin did such a good job with his images. It really expresses that headless man image of that Jupiter is a lot of philosophy and advice. Those are, it is a priest, it's a teacher. Jupiter does tend to, it doesn't rule the head in any system that I know of, but it definitely embodies a lot of those qualities. And Saturn is bursting that bubble a little bit and saying, okay, great, but how can I put those ideas to work? What can I build with those ideas? And I think that's a really nice way of looking at this first decan of Capricorn. And I think we can see that in a number of our images that came through. Somebody says also Jupiter is in its fall in Capricorn. Yep. And so it is boundaried by restriction. Yeah. Therefore, finding balance between the two qualities would be a great accomplishment. Yeah, exactly. And we see that sense of balance really in this Crowley image. I think somebody pointed out hands in a lot of these, but there's also a strong sense of two. People were either holding a bird and a weapon or tool. There was a couple holding hands and holding the bags of money. There was a guy that was clapping, which is coming together of two, but also was an old man and a young man. So that's a dichotomy. The this image, and yeah, so the idea of balancing is coming up a lot with this, um which matches our two of pentacles, of course. I'm kind of trying to talk through this particular image. We've got the javelin, we've got the bird. The one thing I noticed with this image and the Picatrix one, I don't know what a lapwing is, and I don't know what a hoopoe bird is. But the way AI chose to illustrate them, whether or not AI is correct, I don't know. But it illustrated both of them with a long, pointy, kind of narrow beak. And I thought that was very reminiscent of the shape of the javelin. And so the idea of hunting or uh, trying to target something, I think came to mind for me. And uh, in trying to relate that to Jupiter in the first decan of Capricorn, especially with Jupiter's expansiveness, maybe the idea of this is a time when Jupiter's leadership needs to really target something specific or focus on precisely what it wants to aim at in order to accomplish its goals. Somebody says, I looked at the lapwing symbolism as representing intuition, protection, and alertness. Lapwings are also said to be ruthless. Oh, interesting. Okay, cool. I've never even heard of one before. Cool, cool, cool. Ruthless, I think, could be I could argue ruthlessness as I'm doing this thing on Pluto right now, so a lot of my brain power is headed towards Pluto. But ruthless is a really good word for Pluto, but I can see a distorted Jupiter also coming in as ruthless, especially a heavily Saturn distorted Jupiter. That kind of makes some good sense to me. Being Saturnian is making hard choices too. Oh, good point. Yeah. Okay, cool. John, do you want to go on to the Two of Pentacles?
And we have them side by side. Is that all right?
Yeah, that'll work. And so now we're doing the same thing
And
in terms of Jupiter ruling the first decan of Capricorn, how do we see those symbols in this card? And somebody already went there. I love it when it's like, you know, the direction and the flow that John and I are trying to design is working because people are going there. I'm like, yes. So, but now let's take a little bit. So we already had a really good discussion of that from one person, but let's give other people that wanted to talk about the Two of Pentacles, let's give them a chance to chime in as well about this. So our Jupiter, our expansive leader, you know, Jupiter and Saturn are both authorities, but I think of Jupiter as being a benevolent authority and Saturn as being a little bit more strict. And so, and maybe even controlling. And so trying to balance those two sides. It's the greater malefic and the greater malefic, greater benefic and greater malefic that we're working with here. What are some other thoughts on this?
I think one thing
I'm always, oh, go ahead, John.
I was thinking about just the fact, you know, that with this Decan rulership, I mean, it's kind of like Jupiter is subservient a bit to Saturn as its overall ruling planet. It's like Jupiter is like the middle manager of this particular Decan. It's the Decan itself is also described as having this ascendant quality. So it's like in the same arrangement that all, you know, the signs have their different modalities of cardinal, fixed and mutable, and the Decans also have a very similar type of dynamic where the first one is of a bit more of a cardinal nature. It's about creation and initiating things. And with the combination of Jupiter and Saturn, you know, working in that arrangement, and I like the analogy of the bubble being blown. But I think in order for that to happen, there's got to be some resistance in order for that form to really take place, something to work against. It's kind of like, again, that Hokma energy being arrested by that Bina energy. So in order to for something to actually manifest, I think this is kind of like the seed germinating, I think. And I can't help but notice too, just the similarity of the dynamics of these two images.
Well, and we can, yeah, the composition is really similar between them. That is really interesting. But once you brought the Tree of Life into it, it really in many ways is also not just the Hokma energy expanding and being captured by the Bina energy, but then the Bina energy giving forth to the to Hesed. And again, that makes a good sense with Hesed being below the abyss. And
yeah, that does make sense, doesn't it? Whereas it's, yeah, like it's the progression for like Bina is the I guess, you know, the overall, I guess, well, in terms of planetary ones, you know, Saturn is calling the shots, Jupiter is working with it best they can. So it is that transition there from the form, the idea of form in Bina with the actual concretization of that form in Chesed with Jupiter.
yeah,
Almost
yeah, and
it's almost counterintuitive because you would think that, you know, you were talking about restriction versus expansion, and that the restriction would be the point where it's, you know, where it's defined, but actually it's the expansion that's defining it.
yeah, it's a really interesting thing because Hesed is putting it to work. Bina is corralling it, and Hesed is putting it to work and manifesting it. Fours manifest in their solidity. And so it's really nice think about it that way. And it gives Jupiter, in that sense, it gives Jupiter a slightly different interpretation than usual, because when the two are working together like that, Jupiter is just like you said, kind of under Saturn, doing the bidding of Saturn, a worker for Saturn. And so I think that makes a really nice hierarchy, order of command, type of thing, chain of command type of thing. It's like, Jupiter's working for Saturn. Now what happens then? It's like Saturn limits Jupiter's wanting to do everything, and really says, okay, you focus on this, that's your job. And Jupiter's like, perfect, I'm going to get that done. What are some other thoughts on this?
I'm noticing something on this card that I never thought about before. The center of the lemniscate is directly above the foot that's touching ground, and the lemniscate itself represents, now as I'm seeing it, Saturn's rings. But the water, Jupiter, both of the ships are on one part of the wave. So whether it's going up or down, restraining emotion to get the job done, as you said, like Jupiter's answering to Saturn. I've never quite seen it this way. It's just a thought.
I love it. Yeah. I think we probably better move on, John.
So we're going to go next to our second decan. The second decan is ruled by Mars, known esoterically as the Lord of Material Works. And in this decan, it follows our previous decan in terms of, now that we've identified with Earth, a more Earth consciousness, and I think he describes it as, the spirit descending into the body in order to redeem. But now the inspirited body here in this decan now looks to reshape and restructure the territory it's chosen to inhabit in the first decan. And it's really, it's starting to build off of what it's already set in place. I think, one of the ways I think that Austin Coppock had also described this is, and I'll quote from his book, is mind, heart, and body take on the roles of architect, foreman, and laborer. And this is where Mars comes in, where Mars is just, it's calling it's a call to action. Now that you've decided, in the first decan what it is you want to build, what it is you want to achieve, now comes the part where you actually have to start doing the work to make it happen. And so the images that we have here, we'll go through them one at a time again. Our first from Ibn Ezra, a black woman covered with a mantle, and she has a horse. Now, again, we have, this combination of human and animal that comes to mind. And the horse, I think, probably it could be very symbolic of that readiness to, actually go ahead and put the effort in. Our Picatrix image is a man with a common ape in front of him. This is the face of seeking to do what cannot be done and attain what cannot be. So in that particular description, he's kind of emphasizing that there is a particular attribute of ambition that comes with this particular stage in the decan, which is again related to that Mars effort. But along with it comes the hubris that you might be able to achieve or more than you actually might be actually been able to do. So it's kind of almost like, it's an image that has that quality of aspiration, but also one of how should we say it? It's a bit of a cautionary image where you have great aspirations, but also just not setting yourself up for a fall. We'll move on to Agrippa. Agrippa's image is described as two women and a man looking towards a bird flying in the air. And the signification of these is for requiring those things which cannot be done, and for the searching after things which cannot be known. So it again echoes the Picatrix in that caveat that, basically be careful what you wish for, because you may or may not be able to make it happen. And part of the key is, again, just envisioning what is possible in order for that to be made. Bruno's image, a bit, a little related to Picatrix, but in very stark contrast, we have a man throwing a javelin at a dove flying above. It goes on to describe that there's also two women embracing a single man in this, that it's supposed to be in this image, but that was a little too much for AI to handle. So we focused on the man with the javelin. Again, here it's like it's contrasting with the Picatrix version of earlier, where we have where we have just observing that act of flight. But this one is definitely a sort of point. It definitely is positioning oneself to make that strike and to achieve that aim. So it highlights the ambition part of that of this particular deck. With Crowley, again, he borrows again from the Picatrix quite a bit. This is a man with an ape running before him. I mean, in my mind, I think that martial aspect can be represented by that monkey, in the sense that it is a sense of action and that sense of ambition. Well, the fact that it's running before the human is, to me, it's like kind of like that sense of ambition having a tendency to outpace the sense of practicality, which I think in this case, with Mars being involved, and Mars is exalted in Capricorn, so it works well there. So it's pretty easy for that to become, the card of the workaholic, and I guess, also just kind of also, again, saying that there's an element of ambition and hubris involved. And with Austin Coppock, his image description is simply the pyramid, which is an age-old symbol of human endeavor and achievement. If you think about the pyramids that were built in ancient Egypt and in Central America, were very much very outstanding achievements in engineering. But this also, I think, emphasizes the building up of energy that is associated with this deck, and also the planning and design that takes place in order to achieve this. Okay. So now we have our 6 images again. And here we'll go ahead and take a few minutes to scry and to take in some of the images peripherally. We'll give you a few minutes. Okay, then we'll come back. Did anybody have anything they wanted to share? Anything that they were drawn to in particular, or any insights that they might have gotten into the imagery?
I really liked Austin's. I like the pyramid. I think of like, so you have Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces. Those are like the signs of the collective. And Capricorn is like the cardinal one of those signs. So it's like the initiator for the other two. And I think I read this in a Vedic astrology book at some point, but I can't remember which one. But like Capricorn is like it's a downward facing energy, the cardinal sign. Like it literally is like a ground breaker for the other two, like as all the cardinal signs are. So where Capricorn is a builder, it's like I think of somebody with like one of those old military, I think they were called trenching shovels, and they had like really, really hard like iron spades or whatever, and you could literally look down and like shove them into the ground and break the ground with them. I kind of like get that image, like if you're going to build something that's going to benefit the collective, you have to start somewhere. And so Capricorn, that energy kind of does, with the Mars, I think of the iron. It's like kind of very Mars Saturn. And you're doing the really hard yards in the beginning so that something really like lofty and beneficial that is also lasting, that will benefit everybody, can be built on top of that.
Yeah, that's excellent. It's kind of like breaking new ground and starting the construction.
Yeah, and with this being the fixed decan of the cardinal sign, it is something really lasting. And the pyramid is such a perfect example of this energy. The amount of planning and organizing and commanding that had to happen to make those. That really fits nicely with these energies. Yeah, it's the middle decan, so it's the fixed. The three decans just follow that same cardinal fixed mutable. So the middle decan will be the fixed decan.
Yeah, I think that's as far as that, I think there's some of the terminology that I've seen in regards to the modalities of the decans are ascendant, succedent, and cadent. I think they've been described as being. So having,
I think, yeah, Crowley, I think, does that.
right. So it's but it does follow that same. I think they've also. I think Austin also relates those two salts, mercury and sulfur, respectively, in his book, as far as like how it relates to the alchemical essences, where you have he actually counterintuitively, or seemingly counterintuitively, starts off with the solve, with things coming together and taking form, and then comes the preservation of that form in the succedent decan, and then the breaking up and energizing of that in the sulfur in the last decan.
I think I remember what you're talking about, and I think he had like a typo in the Capricorn ones. Because it's an interesting way to look at it, but I think I can't remember what all three of them are, so I'm looking it up right now. It was solve, coagula, and okay. Oh, conjunctio. So he has it wrong in the Capricorn ones, but if you look through some of the others, he has coagula for the first decan and conjunctio for the second and solve for the third.
Yeah.
Which again, this is from, let me see where it's from. It's it's just table 3 modes of the decans. So I don't know where he gets it from. I'm not sure if I would have necessarily done it in that order, but it's like, let me think about that.
I'm still
It is definitely worth contemplating.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around the whole, sequence there in terms of that. But let's see. Should we move on to our selected image?
Yeah, I think I'm going to throw out one other thing though. The as I was looking at these, I love the idea of the impossible things. I think that's a really powerful thing to focus on. And just in terms of using these for magical purposes, um, is to focus on how can we create something that's impossible, and this can be just for yourself, even and something that you don't think you're capable of doing, or you don't think would be possible in your life, and really trying to focus on that to achieve that. The pyramids certainly are, even modern scientists are like, how the heck did these people do that without all the tools and machinery that we have now? So that seemed, even to us now, seems fairly impossible. I do think that the woman and the horse, she really intrigues me. And the idea of, I think that it's that person animal combination. We kind of talked about it a little bit before, but I feel like now the head is back, and Mars rules Aries, which is associated with the head. And so maybe we do get a little bit more of that combination of Jupiter's widespread philosophy, but now focused into a single task. Now the brain gets back into it and is working with the body to produce and to achieve. So which is a really nice, I love Mars and Capricorn. It's such a great energy.
Okay.
Are we ready to move on?
Yeah, let's go ahead and get that going. So again, I've decided to, focus on Crowley's image. We'll probably mix it up as we go. We're not going to, focus on the same source each time, but we'll add some variety to this. But let me go ahead and we'll stick with Crowley's for this month. And again, we have, the image of the man with the monkey running before him. And again, the question is, how do we see the astrology in the image?
I really like the movement in this one. The monkey's running ahead, the man is walking. There was a lot more stability in the first one. So this brings to mind a lot of the productivity that we would expect from Mars, and particularly that exalted Mars. I like the dust that they're kicking up. They're not just walking slowly, they're really moving. The ape is running and the man seems to be walking at a pretty good pace. Which is due to the dust and his hair kind of like moving out behind him. I think it's interesting that the ape is going at a different kind of angle and direction from the man. So there might be again the sense of even going back to the first decan with the cattle prod or the elephant prod, just that idea of somebody, who's in charge and who's guiding what, because the man's looking one direction and angled a little bit more straight, but kind of towards the right of the image, whereas the ape is going the other direction. So I'd be interested as they kind of connect, if they both, and that might be part of it, as they both come together, they might correct both of them and come into more of a straight ahead line. So, but this is AI. And I think a comment came in. But don't get tripped up, need to stay focused. Yeah, yeah. Don't get tripped up, need to stay focused. Yeah, exactly, exactly.
And that kind
Yeah,
of ties back to
Diana,
previous to the other images as well. It was the image with the three people and the guy was pointing at the bird, right? I looked at the bird as inspiration. So it's that focus on the objective. What are we doing? What are we trying to do? Keep coming back to that objective, to see if you're still going the right direction of where you're wanting to be. Interesting. That just came out.
And I don't think it's necessary for people to raise their hand. I really think it's totally fine to, and you know, as long as we're not talking over each other, just speak up. Somebody says that was a dog climbing on my desk that raised the hand. Oh my God. So the dog had something to say. I think Mars likes dogs. They hunt. um Mars, the dog is saying, don't forget the animal. He was running ahead. He's the one that is actually in charge. He knows where he's going. That's what the dog was saying.
I get a sense of that too. It's like, well, again, it's like that, that more primitive aspect or the more desirous aspects of ourselves that are sometimes can outpace our better judgment. So that I guess along with that ambition, it's just, being able to keep pace with that monkey, making sure he doesn't get too far ahead.
I keep coming back to Mars, iron, and iron in our blood. If we don't have enough iron in our blood, we're lethargic. And every one of these images, almost, except for the one with the pointing at the bird, your blood has to be pumping, like you got to get moving, but you can't exhaust yourself on the first shoot out at the gate. I don't know. That's what's coming to me. It's like the monkey. You can spend a lot of time chasing the monkey, but you have to figure out a way to work with the monkey rather than control its primal impulse.
We bring up the tarot card next.
Yeah. As I was trying to find on Instagram, I put, well, maybe I'd find it on my own computer. I used to do this thing where I was writing these lunchtime Astro-Limericks. And I have one for Mars in Capricorn, but I want to find it because it's kind of cute. I think it's cute, but I wrote it, so who knows if anybody else would think that.
I think one of the while you're looking for that, just wanted to maybe share a thought that I had with comparing these two images, and just like if I was just going to transpose the monkey over to the Three of Pentacles, there'd be a question of like which one is the monkey in this case? Since we have three figures in here, the guy on the left is identified as a sculptor. He's got a mallet in his hand and presumably a chisel in the other hand. And one of them is a monk or a priest, I think, and then the other is the I guess the architect who's holding a set of blueprints. And I don't know, it's probably a quirk of the illustration, but I look at that guy with the mallet and it's like, would you get off my back, please? And it's like it's like that's the sense I get. It's like there's always that constant back and forth of like pushing and between labor and management. I think it gets me thinking about that.
So I missed part of what you said. You were trying to find the ape that was running ahead in the image, but where I ended up was that the two people talking were the monkey mind in the background that are distracting. Is that what you were going for? Or did I just go off on a weird tangent?
Actually, yeah, that is actually what I was thinking.
Oh, okay.
That
Interesting. I like
constant
that.
like, did you do this? Did you do this right? Did you? did we get this particular, did you make it upside down, whatever, that kind of thing?
I love that. That is one of the nicest interpretations of the Three of Pentacles I've ever heard. I think to me, one of the things about this card is that so many people interpret it as the two people with the plans are the ones in charge. And I really don't think that that's true because it's a 3, so it's Bina and it's above the abyss. I think that the artist and the creator is the one that's really in charge. I think he is exactly what Austin said. He is the conceiver and the I forget how he put it, and the laborer. There was 3 things that he said, but he comes up with a plan, makes it happen, and does the work. And I think that that describes the one figure of the guy with the mallet. I think the other two, John's interpretation that the other two are just like management that doesn't know what's going on and just came in and is trying to tell you what to do and what was wrong. And you're going, dude, you have no idea what's going on here. Just shut up. You're not helping. I love that.
It applies to corporate America so well.
Yeah. I found my limerick. I had a whole series on this for a while. But Three of Pentacles, Mars ruling the second decan of Capricorn, and there was a particular transit a couple years ago, almost 3 years ago now. But it was Mars has a hip full of shrapnel, thinks swords into plowshares is crapful, but the priest goes before and pledges a war if the soldier will build him a chapel. And I think that embodies a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, especially with Jupiter ruling the first decan, and kind of like what is the motivation for the action? And so the priest has said, okay, I'll give you a war, soldier, that you can fight in, but I want this in return, or I want you to do this first before I then embark on that war. And I think that there's a certain exchange maybe of that goes along with this, and I think it addresses also just that Mars is not the one that's necessarily going to say, oh, I think I'll build a chapel, although he's definitely the one that can get the work done.
So our third decan, of course, is not as this one is going to be ruled by the sun, also esoterically known as the Lord of Earthly Power. And in this particular decan, I think it goes in the progression of again of how should we? It goes in that progression of beginning something new, developing that something, and then here we get to the third stage of that development, in which the focus is now on administrating and regulating that particular piece of machinery that we put together. The archetype usually, I think, they're associated with this particular decan as it is ruled by the sun. It's we think of symbols of authority and influence. Kings might be a good, an older archetype for that. Maybe in modern times, we would look at CEOs as being people that are in great positions of power and influence. And the gist of that is that you've established for yourself in this decan a secure place from which you can order and regulate that particular world that you have established. Ezra's image, I think he describes it as a beautiful black woman, and in her hands are skilled in all kinds of work in the spinning of silk. I think here you would kind of like, it reflects more of that solar energy, where now instead of that Mars energy of building up and pushing those boundaries a little bit more. The focus now is more on self-expression and what one can do with the foundations that they've already built up. The Picatrix describes a man holding a book, which he opens and closes, and before him is the tail of a fish. This is the face of wealth and the accumulation of money and increase and embarking in trade and pressing on to a good end. Now, the book in question here, I think a lot of people, or at least it's a lot of the authors that I've encountered here, consider this to be a book more of like a ledger, like an accounts ledger, and that the opening and closing of that book is the constant diligence of maintaining one's coffers, which comes with establishing a powerful and influential place. I think, the tail of the fish there, I think, could be there because this is a cadent decan, and it's maybe we're looking at the actual tail end of Capricorn in this case, perhaps. Again, it's another one of those surreal images that's supposed to be designed to stick in your mind. Agrippa's is a little more down to earth. It's a woman chaste in body and wise in her work, and a banker gathering his money together on a table. And the signification of this is to govern imprudence and covetous of money and of avarice. So there again, it's like there's that sense of that really being attuned to material power, and a lot of that being associated with money and possessions, but also again, it's like you want maybe again a little bit of a warning that says be careful how much you want and how much you are willing to hold on to. And Bruno, now this is the more Disney sanitized version of the image, which just calls for a maiden wearing white, crushing beneath her feet a small fox and reading a book. Now, AI doesn't take too kindly to violence, so we had to find ways around this. So this is, I think, I like this image better than a fox being crushed, to be honest with you. And perhaps in this case, this is the book being a symbol of advanced knowledge above the primitive instinct of the fox, which we're seeing, I guess, a bit of a progression from the first decan in which you are fully identifying with that primitive instinct. And now gotten to a point where you can rise above that instinct and rely on higher ideas. Again, on Crowley's, he also takes influence from the Picatrix. Simply a man holding a book in which he shuts and opens. Again, there's the implication that the book is mainly concerned with the balancing of accounts, but it also could be seen as a reference book in which you're constantly referring to the notes that you've taken, much like I am right now, in order to make sure that you're on course. And Complex image is simply the throne. One of the caveats that is thrown into this, not to use the pun there, but there's the question of how much control does a person have over their position, and how much control does their position have upon them? In which case, when does the secure place become the prison that limits you? You spend a lot of time and energy in this deck and holding on pretty much to what you have. and maybe not allowing maybe more of the right things to come in, or maybe the wrong things to come out. So it's a constant, it's the price of freedom is constant vigilance. So to use another adage. So now we have our 6 images here. We'll go ahead and take a few moments to contemplate them, to contemplate new images, and we'll go ahead and give you maybe a few minutes here. Okay. So did anybody want to share anything?
Well, I got quite a lot out of this. One thing that I don't think we've brought up yet is the idea that, of course, Capricorn marks the winter solstice with the longest night and the shortest day. And so Sun in Capricorn is at the Sun's greatest weakness. But at the same time, by the third decan here, we are starting to see a little bit of that shift. And there's something about it's the days are shortest on the winter solstice, which would be back in that first decan. But apparently the morning it's still dark later and later in the morning, even after the winter solstice. It's just that it doesn't get dark as soon in the evening. And it's sometime in January that the mornings start to shift. I remember reading that somewhere one time and thought it was pretty interesting. And so this is interesting that it is the last decan of Capricorn that we have ruled by the sun, which very well might align with the time period when those morning hours start to get brighter just a touch earlier every day. And that extended into quite a number of thoughts for me about Capricorn and the time of year, and going back to the just the wheel of the year ideas that Capricorn is a time of needing to stockpile provisions, or have already stockpiled provisions so that you're living off your stockpile at this time of the year. And so the wealth accumulation of wealth and stuff like that makes really good sense here. And that more than that, I was thinking of the fox, and fox is one of the symbols. They can be symbols of deception or of stealing, or they're very clever, but it tends to go along with the idea of stealing or deception. And so the idea of even the hope of the sun and of the light kind of overcoming the feeling that you need to do anything you can to survive during this darkest point of the year, and whether it is to steal or lie or cheat or just get what you need. And that sense of solar reason, which Jupiter wasn't allowed to be reasonable because he's debilitated in this sign. And then Mars brings a little bit more of the head idea, but he's still really that hardworking thing. And now the sun comes in, which is this reason, this hope that, okay, now we can start having hope again. Now we don't have to sink into those fears, which are always Saturnian, sink into those fears of what am I going to do to survive. We're starting to be able to see into the future and see how things will unfold.
With the foxes too, I was thinking of that Song of Solomon Bible verse. I don't remember exactly how it goes, but it's like take away or catch or something the little foxes that spoil the vines. And it's like about, because it's the sun decan, I was thinking of like focusing on that center, like staying in your center and like focusing on that eyes on the prize kind of energy, so that you're not getting distracted, like when you're finishing the great work, so to speak. Like I was thinking of somebody like maybe writing a thesis paper, and then they're like, oh, but I got distracted because my friend texted me that there was like an anime marathon on Netflix or something, and I didn't finish my paper. And, I self-sabotage, like kind of like, overcoming self-sabotaging behaviors, I guess.
Yeah, nice. I like that. Let's go ahead and move on, John.
All right, so we will again use Crowley as our test image here. And this is, of course, the image of the man opening and closing a book. And we are looking at, of course, this cadent decan ruled by the sun.
I like how AI decided to put light in it. Did you say that it was ruled by the sun when you gave it the prompt?
I didn't. No.
It's very cool that the light's coming out of it.
Now, a lot of this, one of the things I find a little intriguing about that whole process of AI prompting is it's kind of like, you're dipping this description into what amounts to a collective consciousness of data. And it's almost like, it's like the computers are dreaming in a sense. You're not really positive what it'll spit out when you type in a prompt. And I used the language verbatim whenever I could. So it was just intriguing to see what came out and if it had any. And plus, it's like, there's some inferences of, modernism here, as well as, antique imagery.
The other image that I'm getting here with the shape of that book is just the rays of the sun as it rises on the horizon. And so this idea of dawning and a dawn and a kind of a fresh start, which are all very good wheel of the year type of terms to use for this decan. So pretty nice.
Okay, we'll move on.
Let's go ahead. Yeah. And again, I think a lot of the things we've already talked about really show up here in this decan. The idea of the man counting his wealth on the desk or whatever it was. And even the idea of once you've created something, once you've built something, you have to maintain it or hold on to it. I think some of those energies are coming through with this card as well. There's so many interpretations that I've heard for this card. But to really try to stick with the sun energy and one of my early decks was the Morgan Greer, and there was a wall behind the guy, and the coin on his head was kind of coming up over the wall, and it mimicked the sun card. So it kind of gave a little nod to the solar rulership of this. And we can even see maybe that sense of the solar energy of the body and the solar energy rising above. I mean, this is the crown or the throne in Austin, and Austin specifically in his image has a throne with a crown hovering above it. There's no person, but the crown is in there. And so just the abstraction, we went from a headless person into this busy industrial component and into this ruler and authority whose crown is there, which links to the source of the authority. Any other comments on this?
I mean, just as a thought that came to mind too, just comparing the two images, and of course, you get this sense of in the card that there's a real a strong sense of holding on to that power. And with Crowley's image, or at least the image that we've got here, is you could easily replace that book with a smartphone or something in our, that's like, our modern day. So, when it feels, like at least, gives us the sense that we're connected, we're on top of our information and everything. So I think, that's, again, as we experience earthly power in our everyday lives, and sometimes, it's kind of scary to, see some of that control go. So it's important. I think it's just important for us to really, get a sense of like we know what we're doing, we were on track of things. If we forget, we've at least got references to look to.
Yeah, I just had a really interesting insight. The 4 pentacles here could represent the 4 quarter days of the year, with the 2 under the feet being the horizontal axis of the equinoxes, and the above and below ones being the summer solstice and the winter solstice. And the summer solstice with the longest day and the sun higher in the its trajectory, going higher overhead, and then its winter trajectory would be the one held at the chest, where the trajectory is so much lower. And so all of a sudden I'm like, wow, that really opens up the Four of Pentacles for me.
Excellent.
And it puts them all, it's like the thing, what we do now, which is that lower trajectory and that slightly more centered. We were talked about the impossible and striving for the impossible, and we have to start it from where we are now. That's another thing that is so important. I get so many clients that come and they have big impossible dreams, but they think that you almost always think they need money to make it happen. And I don't think that's true. And I had one session where I couldn't, she was so she was impossible. I thought she was convinced that she needed to manifest $1 million, like literally manifest, like it would come from nowhere, $1 million to do the thing that she wanted to do. And the only thing that would come out of my mouth, well, I mean, I said some other things, but once she started arguing with me, which clients will do, the only thing that would come out of my mouth was, you have everything you need. You have everything you need. And it was a frustrating reading, but that was obviously what spirit wanted her to hear. I don't think she heard it. But I remembered, and I have always tried to remind myself with any goal that I have is I have everything I need to start this goal. And I think that is that coin in the center. And so dream big, dream the impossible, and start where you are, where your feet are, and create. This is the time. Anything else, John? Are we done?
Yeah, just real quickly, regarding the Four of Pentacles, the Rider-Waite, it actually brings to mind what I believe was the Bruno image of a woman in white with some male who was dealing with money. And that was actually the most important image in that group for me, because what it most clearly said to me was, use ethics with power. And I think this card looks the same way to me. It's like you can have power, but don't, ethical use is required for the chains to be loosened, or ethical use must be understood with this kind of power, no matter how you wield it. That's all.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, I love that. I think we better bring this to a close, but this is, just so you know, this is a series, and so we'll be here every month, first Saturday of the month, and go through the decans, the signs one by one, corresponding with what we're in right now. So be sure to check it out on Greater Seattle Tarot Meetup or the Denver Tarot Geeks, and sign up for the series. I think it's going to be good. I'm super excited. Hopefully you guys are super excited too.
Well, thank you everyone for showing up and participating. I hope we'll hope to see you again next month when we cover Aquarius.
Yeah, 5, 6, and 7 of Swords.